Hi guys, Omores here. Today we are diving into a piece of Apple history, Rhapsody OS DR2 from 1998, running just the way I like it on real hardware. We're gonna use an Intel i7 3770 CPU, an SSD, and a SATA optical drive. Wait, what's an Apple operating system from the late 90s running on an Intel CPU? Yes, you heard that right. Now let me provide you some quick context. In the mid-90s, Apple was in serious trouble.
But there's a problem now. And the problem is a very simple one. It's called Windows.
In 1997, Steve Jobs returned to the company and Apple acquired Next Computer, which Jobs had founded earlier. So Rhapsody OS was essentially Next Step, a Unix-based operating system used on Next hardware. And since Next computers also ran on a PowerPC architecture, it wasn't too hard to adapt it for Macs. But here's the twist. Apple also developed a Plan B, an x86 version of Rhapsody OS. This marked the first time Apple experimented with Intel processors as a fallback option. Fast forward, Rhapsody eventually evolved into Mac OS X Server and the regular Mac OS X, and the x86 version was shelved. At least until 2006, when we all know what happened.
And yes, it's true. We are going to begin the transition from the PowerPC to Intel processors, and we are going to begin it for you now and for our customers next year. Now, why are we going to do this? Right?
Now let's get back to our build. The star of today's setup is a Gigabyte Z68 motherboard, which supports SATA devices in IDE legacy mode. This is a critical feature because Rhapsody OS expects the primary IDE channel to be locked to IRQ14 and the secondary to IRQ15. Such a configuration was standard in the 90s, and without device detection at these addresses, the installation cannot proceed. However, I know that Windows NT 3.1, an OS released by Microsoft in late 1993, successfully detected ID controllers on this exact motherboard, and now we are dealing with an OS released in 1998, so Rhapsody should be just as capable, if not better. Anyway, IDE isn't the only option for our disk configuration. Rhapsody does support a handful of SCSI devices, including the widely used Adaptec 2940, which is a PCI device. I do have two of these adapters, but I don't currently have any functional SCSI optical drive. So the SCSI root isn't an option for this installation because, as you are about to see, an optical drive is not optional as it is for a Windows setup. So let's see if we can bring this piece of Apple history back to life using what I consider modern hardware, even if Ivy Bridge CPUs are not exactly cutting-edge technology. Now back to the installation process. The first issue I encountered was with the Rhapsody installation ISO. I downloaded several ISO images, but none were readable by my go-to programs, including Power ISO, which is usually very reliable. To make matters worse, in a retro action video was mentioned that some Rhapsody ISOs, particularly those for PowerPC, weren't dumped correctly.
So the images that are floating around on the internet for Rhapsody, DR2, PowerPC, those don't work.
Could this also be the case with the Intel version? Actually, no. The ISO was fine. I just had to turn to an old friend, Nero Burning Chrome, and this time the ISO was burned promptly. No errors, no questions asked. Now that we have a good installation CD, we need to boot from floppy, and this is mandatory. And one thing missing from this setup is a floppy drive. The challenge here is that we need two floppies, the boot floppy and the driver floppy. While the boot floppy can be dumped onto a USB stick using a program like Unit Bootin, and it will boot just fine, There's a catch. As soon as we remove the USB stick to insert the second floppy image, the emulation magic falls apart, and that's game over. Now we need a real floppy drive, and my rather rare socket 1155 motherboard with a floppy controller wasn't available for this job. So I picked a socket 775 motherboard to start the installation. This motherboard can run SATA drives in legacy IDE mode, referred to here as compatible mode, with the alternative being enhanced mode. Now, booting from the installation floppy disk starts the process normally. We are prompted for the second disk as expected, but soon we'll end up with a kernel panic message error on the screen, which of course is related to memory. This wasn't exactly a surprise for me, not after installing Windows 9X on so many modern configurations. It's the exact same story. Having too much memory causes memory allocation problems. Fortunately, the solution is similar. We can limit the physical RAM the OS will take in consideration. For Windows, this involves adding the maxfizz page line in the system.ini file. Now for Rhapsody, the equivalent command is maxmem equals anything between 32 megabytes to stay within the minimum requirements and up to 192 megabytes. After settling things with RAM allocation via maxmem, the text-based part of the installation proceeded smoothly on this Asus P5E motherboard. However, since the ultimate goal was the Ivy bridge setup, I transferred the SSD to the Gigabyte motherboard once the floppy drive was no longer needed. This Gigabyte motherboard includes a serial port, which is much needed when there is just a single PS2 port and no USB support whatsoever. So my turned yellow Genius serial mouse was promptly detected, and I could deal with the graphical portion of the installation, which starts straight with our hardware setup. While hardware support is somewhat limited, it's reasonable given what was on the market in 1997 and early 1998. There is of course support for popular video cards from the era, and I knew from the start that my PCI ATI Rage 2 was on the list. So the card was detected with no issues and it simply worked as expected. This was totally not the case with the 3COM 905 Ethernet card, which caused a lot of troubleshooting and no success. In the end, I managed to find another supported PCI Ethernet card from Intel, which got the job done this time. The sound support is actually very limited. Unfortunately, there is no PCI card listed, so I had to settle with a standard PCB port, which works as expected. Next, it was time to install software. There is a lot of stuff to be installed, like developer tools and documentation, which, by the way, most of it is in HTML, but there is no browser included. Let's not forget this is still a developer release and not the final product. Next, we have to deal with the setup assistant. Here we can set up our network, username, pick a password or not, and we are good to go. This was the initial setup. Now I want to show you how Rhapsody boots and looks on a real screen at 1024 by 768. By the way, you are about to see a name on the screen that I haven't mentioned so far, Rhapsody Mac operating system. If you are wondering what Mac is, well, Rhapsody is built on the Mac 2.5 Unix microkernel, which is anything but fast. From what I have read, there is too much talk between its internal subsystems, but things got better in future releases. And if the way the messages are laid on the screen looks funny to you, it's worth noting that Rhapsody uses a PostScript-based display driver. Yes, the same PostScript technology used by printers. What do you know? So what's next? I think a detailed tour inside the Rhapsody OS deserves its own video, but for now, let's take a quick online tour. This might actually be a premiere, at least compared to other recent Rhapsody videos I have seen, where online functionality wasn't possible due to some various hardware limitations. I nearly had the same issue, but an old Intel PCI Ethernet card could get along with Rhapsody, so here we go. As I mentioned before, Rhapsody doesn't come with a browser, and to install any software, some work in the terminal is required because by default there are no apps with a graphical user interface for unzipping files or installing programs. This can be solved later with some third-party apps, but to get these apps running in the first place, we still have to type some Unix commands. For browsing, there is OmniWeb 3, which looks very solid for a 1998 browser. Use on today's web is, of course, very limited, but at least websites optimized for the old Internet Explorer, like the still active Win3X forum, will display just fine. Of course, there can't be any HTTPS support, but at least OmniWeb is very relaxed about this issue. Just take a look at this error message. Next, there is a solid FTP support, as the FTP protocols haven't changed that much over the years, and the local FTP server was easily accessible, making file transfers to Rhapsody an easy job. Otherwise, we have to keep burning CDs to get stuff in. Not that there is so much stuff available for x86 Rhapsody. And speaking of things that run on Rhapsody, since Doom can run on practically everything, there had to be a version for Rhapsody. Otherwise, what are we even doing here? And of course there is, it's called Rhapsody, and it works, sure. There is a bit of screen tearing going on, but it works. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you would like to see more content like this or if there should be even more Windows action.